Welcome to Finding Faith, the space we come to share stories of encounter, ask questions, and share in the lived experience of others. As you listen to the stories of our interview guests, I ask that you consider the courage it takes to stand before your peers and share your experience of faith for the benefit of another. My name is Jessie Bennett, and this is the 29th episode of Finding Faith. So today we have with us Doug Payne. Doug, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Well, I'm an expected graduate of WKU in the field of recreation, and I'll be graduating this spring. I am the good, ripe age of 23. Come from a decent-sized home of 7. There's 5 children, 4 boys, and a girl. I'm the second and best by far, although I'm biased. I am blessed to have a father and a mother after about, I think, roughly 25 years of marriage still, maybe a little more. I'm a little weird. I'm partly nerd because I love Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a musician, singer, songwriter. I mostly play guitar, but I play a bunch of other things too. I'm an amateur athlete in most sports that involve plastic flying discs. My name is Doug Payne.
That is a very interesting bio, Doug. I like it, especially the flying discs part. Favorite Frisbee golf or Ultimate Frisbee?
Ultimate Frisbee is my favorite sport to play with a team, but I do love disc golf as well.
All right. I can dig it. So Doug is going to talk to us about his story and how he came to encounter Jesus through his story. More specifically, how he came to encounter him through the discernment of his vocation and learning to trust and really trust where it is that the Lord was calling him to. So, Doug, why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah, my story. It's great. It's a great story. I guess my story begins really from my confirmation. My confirmation day, I chose St. Luke to be my duty dude. He's my man. But I had no idea why I chose him, aside from he was the medical patron saint of doctors. And the funny part of my confirmation, which is where I'm going to start, is we were all huddled up together, this like group of 9, because I come from a small parish, Holy Redeemer Catholic Church in Beaver Dam. And Bishop Medley has us. We're surrounding him. He's just recently been ordained. He's our bishop. And it's like, whoa, this guy. Who's this guy? He's got a ring. He's like dressed up. What is going on? And he asks a question. And I think it's his favorite question to ask any individual is, who of you thinks they want to be a priest? And then I thought, whoa, in my head. I was looking around at all the other guys like nodding like, oh yeah, we're definitely all going to raise our hand. And then I raised my hand. No one else did. And it was like it's like Sauron's eye from Lord of the Rings, like I was encased in his light of his eyes. And he asked for my name. And being a smart 7th grader, I gave him my first name, which isn't Doug. It's Orrin, Orrin. So that way, if he said my name during Mass, no one would know who I was, which I'm pretty sure he did. But from that moment, that was the first time I'd ever even considered what, like, priesthood. Like, that's something that men can do in the Catholic Church. And so that's when I say it began. Because also, confirmation's that stepping point beyond to, like, continue. We're confirmed to be warriors. And so that was my slap in the face, I guess, even if the bishop didn't do it. So from then, I just kept doing stuff. At that point, I was already involved at Gas River Catholic Youth Retreat Center. And so I loved it the first time I went, which was a little earlier than my confirmation. It was, my first summer was I was going to my 6th grade year, and it was fantastic. I loved it. And it was the first time, it's probably my first encounter with the Lord, truly, because I had only recognized Christ in the church. Like, I understood at the very most that this little piece of bread that gets raised during Mass is what we think is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. And I knew that. But I never really had a personal relationship with God. And so at camp, I was able to realize, whoa, like, God's like present here, outside, in nature, around me, in people. It's like, oh, I love this place. And so I kept coming back year after year after year. And also at that point, I was old enough to go to the youth conferences. So I went to E29 that spring year, I think when I was in 7th grade, before my confirmation. And I went to ODYC. All of them were great. And just kind of continued to pursue the church and grow in knowledge of the church. I knew from the beginning, I've never really left or questioned too much of the church. I understand that the church is the trueness of everything. And I wanted to know why. And so I was going to camp and I was learning, like, I was getting all my catechesis, really. Not that my CCD wasn't okay, but it's kind of hard to read Genesis to a 4th grader, you know? But at camp, I was learning that, like, I'm loved, and then here's a little bit more about the church. Here's a little bit more. And then one of my greatest encounters with the Lord was at E2000. And that was when, like, I knew, like, the Eucharist was the Eucharist. Like, Jesus is present in the Eucharist, because nothing that occurred in that moment that I'm going to say something about can deter me from that thought. It's kind of the moment I cling to. That's what I say. The moment I cling to when I knew God was real. God is present. So I was it's probably middle school. It's probably my 2nd or 3rd U2000. And we were kneeling. It was, I think, the last night. And one of the sisters was reading some type of meditation. I wasn't really close, but I wasn't super far. I was like close to the middle of the gym. If you're ever in U2000, you know what I'm talking about. And I was just like looking at the Eucharist. I was like trying to understand what's going on. And I was listening to the sister, and she's talking about like unburdening. I was like, oh, okay, unburdening. I think I know what that means. She's like, let's just let go of things. It's like, you know what? I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to let go. And then I did. It was great. It's like the grace of God allowed me to let go of the burdens of my life. And in that instance, in that moment, this overwhelming pouring into occurred in my heart. It's kind of like you're filling up a glass of water or whatever you're drinking, and it brims over. Like God's love and mercy was brimming over in my heart, and it was intense. And my heart rate like picked up. And once I started, it only lasted maybe not even more than a minute, because as soon as I was like, whoa, this is great. And I was like, but I suck. I'm terrible. And then I just brought the burdens back onto myself, and it was gone. And then I thought about it for a little bit. I was like, was that heartburn? Like, I was like, no, I think I'm pretty sure I just had like a Subway sandwich today. So I don't think it was heartburn. So it's like the moment that I knew the Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. Like God touched my heart that evening. And it was great. But because we're terrible, And I'm much like the Israelites in the desert. And even though God's like giving us everything, I still was faithful, but not trying as much. I guess it was like an intellectual hill that I was trying to climb, but there was no personal relationship with God being formed as much. I mean, I enjoy going to camp and everything that came along with that, but there was no like heartfulness to everything I did. And I love service. That's probably the biggest thing I would take from this whole story. After a while of intellectual knowledge and throughout high school, going to camp and serving as much as I can, from being a counselor, being a camper, I came to about my junior year, close to my junior year of high school. And this is where I had this is where my relationship with God became very apparent to me. And so the summer between my sophomore and junior year was Blessed are the Poor in Spirit, for this is the Kingdom of God. And Jesse was there. It was a great summer. It's like a camper, SIT, as a counselor. I was there practically the whole summer, aside from the 2 weeks that I was gone for marching band practice and band camp, because I'm a band kid. During that summer, Deacon Corey Bruns, which will be soon Father Corey Bruns, which is really weird to me, and probably to other people that have known him before when he was in seminary, just a seminarian. He really stressed the vocation ideal to all the men, to everyone, any guy. And it perked my ear. It wasn't something I was thinking about, but it was like, okay, I'll remain open. And he did say some things that I liked. It's like, hey, you get to go to school for free. It's like, oh, that sounds nice. And it's only 2 years of your life. It's like, okay, 2 years of my life, that's fine. And you'll grow as a man and individual. It's like, I think I would want that. And that was about all it really occurred. It's like, oh, that sounds interesting. But it got me thinking, is like, what am I actually going to do after I graduate? And by the end of the summer, I knew that I wasn't doing enough in my faith life. I was like, man, I believe all these things, and I believe that I should pray. And there's kind of like this practice what you preach kind of moment. It's like you live in a community so long and they pray and you talk about Jesus, but you're not actually doing anything to build a relationship with Jesus. Well, you got to work on that. So to kill two birds with a stone, I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pray for what I should do after high school. And what I decided to do, I'm not saying anyone should do this. I'm really determined as an individual sometimes. I started praying the rosary every day. So like, not praying the rosary every day, praying the rosary every day. And the reason the rosary is because it was the one prayer that I really enjoyed the most. I know it's kind of long for some people, but I really enjoyed it. And the reason I enjoyed it the most is because Mary's done a lot in my life. And that was the first prayer I probably learned from my grandparents. And that was the expectation when I went over to their house most often when I was really young, which we went quite a bit, my older brother and I. And so we would pray the rosary together. And even one Lent, my mom and dad, like our family, prayed the rosary through Lent. And in a lot of difficult moments, I usually pray a Hail Mary because it's the most comforting thing to do in stressful situations. So anyways, back to the story. So I started praying the rosary every day for a specific intention of a vocation. And this is all through my junior year. I really started to see a change in my life. There was the way I perceived things. I was able to take wrongs patiently, kind of, like the mercy, corporal work of mercy, or spiritual work of mercy. And I was like, okay, something's happening. And I started just being happier. And that was crazy. It's like, oh, I didn't know I could be happy. But it did. And then I probably around my spring semester of junior year, sometime, I think it was maybe during the Easter season. This is the next propulsion of my story. Next encounter. And I was at Mass. Just a normal Sunday Mass kind of deal. Just went to communion. Jesus in my body. I'm praying. And I'm watching Father Colombo. He's so great. I guess doing the dishes. The real term is purifying the vessels, but doing the dishes. And just kind of like looking at him quietly. And then the question just popped in my mind. I was like, why not me? And then right at that moment, that instant, just like before, my heart this time was inflamed in this yearning. And that's the best way I can describe it, is a yearning. I don't know if you ever yearned for something. Like, I'm not talking like I yearn for chocolate or like I have a craving for Taco Bell. I'm not sure people. Oh yeah, Taco Bell. They crave. I think that's the cravings menu. It's a thing. It's a thing. It's like yearnings, like this strong, overwhelming desire. And this strong, overwhelming desire, the first thought that came from that was seminary. I want to note that it was seminary. When I left Mass that day, I knew what I had to do. It's like I knew that the Lord was calling me to seminary, but I had no idea how to approach that. But I knew that's what I had to do after I graduated. And so, because it was close to summer, I didn't tell anyone. I just kind of like let it be in my mind. And the whole summer, I was at camp. Conveniently, there's a lot of priests that show up around camp. And so you can ask a bunch of different people about seminary. And so I did. And they all had good things to say. It was usually like I went to confession, and then like right after I was like, hey, I'm thinking about seminary, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh, barf. Like, here's information. It's like, oh, cool. And so in the October of my senior year, I went to Father Jason, and I had like my first meeting with him. And after my first meeting with him, that like yearning, that heart nervousness like went away. And so I knew from that moment, and when my heart subsided, that this is what I should do. And I had full trust that that's what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to get to seminary. I was pretty confident I would, but I never told myself that it was going to happen. Like, this is going to happen with certitude. Even though people would tell me, it's like, yeah, you're certain. Like, but I get through all the programming, whatever, and I talked to my mom and dad, and that was fine. It was kind of a difficult thing, I think, in my family, just a little bit, because, well, my mom, and she'll attest to it, it's like, she didn't really want me to go to seminary. It's like, that's my boy. He's going to be the dad I long, like, he's going to be the greatest father. That's probably not the best thing to say, but I mean, she always said, like, you'd be like a really good dad someday. I was like, oh, thanks. Sure. And yeah, so I graduate, and I do one more summer at camp and preparation before I go to seminary. I go to seminary in the fall, 2016, and definitely the best year ever. It was a really great year of seminary, and I really loved it. And I went back to camp, and I was finally a staff member, something I longed to be for so long. That's something I've wanted since I first went to camp, was to be on staff, because of the first staff member that was out there. Joey was my first staff. He was in the cabin with me. Oh, Joey. And it was just Joey and 3 other guys. And it was great. But that was a great summer. That was that first encounter summer. But from that, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And every summer then when I was working as a counselor, that's why I kept going back. So like, I wanted to have my name in the hat. I wanted to see like, I want to do this. I want to serve. The biggest reason I went back is because I had such a great first summer. I always wanted to give that first summer experience back to someone else. Because that was probably one of the best things that happened to me, was having that encounter. So I'm on staff. It's great. I'm in seminary. But the bad part about being in seminary is that like, you can't date. It's kind of like the rule. The also bad part is when you work at camp, you just work with too many beautiful young women who are pursuing Christ. And so it's really hard for you to like not to, kind of like fall in love with them. Lo and behold, I sort of did. And I really had to like watch myself. And so when I came back into the sophomore year in the fall, like I was just like, man, like, I don't know, like this, I never thought about marriage really before anymore. Like I just kind of went to seminary, like, do I still need to be here? And it's kind of like, it was more of an infatuation, but, and I was talking to my spiritual director, he's like, Doug, you should tell her. Like, Doug, you need to tell her. Doug, you should tell her. It's like, yeah, sure, I will. And then by the end of my fall semester, I tell her, I asked her, and she said, I don't really feel that way about you. I was like, sick, great. That didn't hurt at all. Oh, man, no, it didn't. But I prayed before I encountered that, and I kind of knew that was what she was probably going to say. But the important part of this section was when I got back that spring semester in my sophomore year, I still felt like there's this uneasiness is like, well, she told me no, but like, I still feel like I don't maybe need to be here. Like, is this the community that I need? Is this community I long for? And so I stayed for a good part of that semester. And one of the important things that the rector, Father Joe Moriarty, would say is take it semester by semester. Like, you're not going to be ordained a priest like in a year. So there's like no rush. By the end of that semester, though, I felt like, okay, I don't feel like God's calling me to leave. And so I left. I didn't leave. I left seminary, but like I just went to go back to summer camp. So I went to summer camp that summer, and things were a little better. I kind of knew myself more, so I was able to like integrate a little better. And at one point, I was in the chapel, Gasper, and I was just sitting there in the morning, and I was just like, you know what? Yes, this is we could do this. Like, I accept your request. I will be a priest. It's like I'm in it for the long haul, God. Like, let's do this. And it was I thought it was a great moment. But at the end of my summer, the woman that I had first asked, she said, hey, blah, blah, this isn't mutual anymore. And I was like, what? I kind of like describe it like, I did this before. So I had like put the idea of her like on a shelf in my room of like my heart or my mind, like out of sight, out of mind. But then she said that it was like a jar of marbles like fell off of that shelf and like broke out in front of my face. And so I was like standing in the midst of marbles, and I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do? I was like, I guess I'll just pick up the marbles. And that's kind of like just what happened. It's like, oh, you like me? It's like, oh, yay. It's like, what a fantastic time. But I knew like, so there was like a small time where it was like, we don't care about anything. We're infatuated with each other. It's fine. But we did have a conversation, which was really good. And that was, it's like, we both are like, don't know like truly what God's calling us to do. At this point, she had already been to, she had like visited a convent, and she was like interested in it. And then I was like, I'm still in seminary. Like, I'm not leaving for you because that's not happening. Like, it's like, I thought about it, but I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to say this. If a guy does that, any women out there, if you're here, listen to this, and you're interested in that guy in seminary, and he says, I'm going to leave for you, it's like, you should turn back, because that means he's giving up an ideal, like a vocation just for you. It's like, that is a lot of pressure for a woman because that's not, like, that's probably not true. Like, most guys that leave seminary do not end up marrying the person that they left seminary for. And I didn't want that to be me. And I didn't put that pressure on her. So we're like, well, we don't know, like, the A, B vocations. Like, we could be the A vocation for each other, or this could be like the B vocation. And so it was like, okay, well, let's just not talk to each other. And then, so we can like pray about this. More so, like, I needed to pray about it. I was like, if I had any contact with her, I knew it would kind of get things messy. And so I get back my fall semester, and I had this thing in my heart. It's like, okay, so this woman that is really great, like, likes me. And there's like a potential for a relationship with that. It's like, okay, well, that means there's probably a potential relationship with other women that are out there. I've never given that really a second thought. It was kind of like, oh, seminary, let's go to seminary. Yeah. So I was like, okay. It's like, well, I can't, that's not why I'm going to leave yet. It's like, I need to know certainly why. I need, like, God, I need you to say, like, Doug, get out of here. Like, you need to leave. It's like, cause I need some type of reasoning other than I'm leaving for a girl. That was a really hard semester for me, given that, because I really had no idea what was going on. I was trying to discern two vocations at the same time, and that is horrible. And I lost my spiritual director that year. He passed away like 3 days before I got there. And so at one of the roughest times spiritually, it almost felt like I had no one to talk to. Because the spiritual director I had was given, he wasn't there all the time. Because the spiritual director I did have, he was in-house. So at any point during the day, I would have been able to go into his office or try to get him and to, like, talk to him. But that wasn't true at that point. And so a lot of time was spent in the chapel. I stood, sat, knelt, cried. It was a mess. I was a mess. It was a good semester of praying. Eventually, close to October, November, 3/4 of the way through the semester, I was sitting in the chapel, and it was right after night prayer. There was a group of guys doing like a scapular devotion, and I was sitting there, just kind of praying, and sat silently. God comes to us in the silence. It's great. And it was just a thought. It's like, Doug, you need to leave. And then at that moment, it's like, it wasn't like God. It didn't sound like God was telling me. It was like Doug telling Doug, you need to leave. Like, you finally realize that you need to leave. And it's like, you know that you needed to leave for a while, but you just couldn't accept it. And that was the moment that I had to accept. It's like, Doug, you need to leave. So the next day, that was a Tuesday. The next day was a Wednesday, and we had optional adoration. And so in that evening, I got out my journal. I was like, all right, I hate pros and cons lists, but here we go. We're going to write pros and cons for staying or leaving. And so the pros are like, you'll graduate, you won't have student debt. I'll graduate with this person. It's like, this person's going to be going to seminary, so like we'd be ordained together. Just like a bunch of like small things. And I was like, these are very consequential. It's like, okay. No, wait, that's not the pros. That was the cons. Sorry. These are the cons for leaving. These are the pros. The pros for leaving were Well, for one, it was, Doug, you are not emotionally stable enough to stay. Like, come on, man. Like, you've cried. Like, you don't know what's going on. I was like, okay, fair, Doug. That's good. Yeah. And second to that was, it's like, Doug, you've given it. Like, you've been here. You poured yourself into this thing. You haven't really dated at all, and don't actually know if you're called to marriage or not. It's like, okay, fair. It's like, and you can't know unless you go out into the world and date. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, Doug. And if you date and you know that you're not called to marriage, like, how much more can you give yourself to this vocation? It's like, oh yeah, that's fair. And if you're not called to this, like, then you know you're called to marriage. It's like win-win. It's like, okay, that's pretty good. But it still wasn't the moment of realization, I guess. There's all really good things, but all good things are from the Lord. And the last thing was, like, Doug, it was God saying, Doug, will you trust me? Like, will you trust me that you're going to be okay if you leave? And it was this little small conversation with God. It's like, but like, I really love this place. It's like, but do you trust me? It's kind of like when Jesus encounters Peter after resurrection. It's like, do you love me? He's like, yeah, of course I love you, Lord. I love you like a friend. You're my brother. He's like, do you trust me, Doug? It's like, if I say no, where is it going to put me? I'm just going to be another semester in, emotionally unstable, not happy, because I don't know where I'll be. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm going to trust God. Like, this is it. And so I wrote it down. It's like, Doug, at this moment, at this time, this date, you said, I'm going to trust the Lord. Because I knew after that moment, because we all doubt, is I'm going to think, oh, well, should I really be leaving? But I wrote it down. And I followed through. And it was a kind of odd time, after I left that semester. There was a certain peace with it, and I didn't really know what was going to happen. Then I knew that this is what I should be doing. Yeah, that was December 13th was the official day I left seminary. I left the seminary and I just dropped out of school because So seminary is like the frat, and then there's a college that the seminary frat boys go to. And so I left seminary, just turned out, and then I also dropped out of that school that I was going to, Mary University in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I went to Bishop Salisbury College Seminary in Indianapolis, Indiana. Really fast. Yeah, and then I got a job at Cracker Barrel. And this spring in 2019 is about the only place that actually would hire me, I guess. I don't know. I thought I had a cinch for any job because I had so much human resource experience being at camp, but apparently not. And service. Maybe I was selling myself short. I don't know. And it was great, actually. It was a pretty good experience working at Cracker Barrel. They have a good foundation, like morals, but you never know more about the place until like you meet the people. There's a certain aspect of respect that you had to get to earn, which was fought for. But I never like gave up any of my values and really just try to live Christ-like as much as I could. And it was really great because those were like frontline evangelization too. It was, I mean, you're encountering people at different points in their life. And sometimes they come in several times a week or every now and again. And it was a great way, I say, for evangelization too, because I got to share my story every day to like probably close to 50 to 70 people, because that's how many people I'd probably serve in a day. And, you know, it's like a bunch of, mostly it's older people. And they would say like, so are you in school? I'm like, no, I dropped out, but here's why. And then, so I talk about how I was in seminary and blah, 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 and how I wanted to do ministry. And they're like, oh, great. We'll be praying for you. It's like, wow, thanks. And it was great. It was good. However, I got really exhausted. And within the first 2 weeks I worked at Cracker Barrel, I knew that I never wanted to work secular. I was like, I think I want to work for the church. It's like, I don't care how much I get paid. Just let me work for the church. I want to do ministry. This is just not what it is for me. Because serving is hard. It is. So for anyone that's serving out there, it's like, I get it. It's hard. It stinks. But I got my own apron, my name on it. That's cool. And I still have them. And yeah. So how did I get out of Cracker Barrel? This is the better part. So I got a text from my friend, a friend of mine from seminary. And he said, hey, Doug, are you working at camp? And I said, probably not, but maybe, because I applied for camp again, but I really wasn't, my heart wasn't super into it. It was like, I wanted to get out of Cracker Barrel. And this is like one of those ways I could get out. It's like, if I could have a job. And so I was like, probably not, but maybe he's like, hey, think about Catholic Heart work camp. I was like, okay. Like, I know you love Catholic Heart and you've talked about it a lot before, but like, what is it? And he's like, okay, he want me to send you some information. I was like, okay. And then like within like a weekend, it was an email with like the staff coordinator, and I was filling out stuff, and I had a phone call with her, and she's like, yeah, you sound like a pretty cool guy. I'm like, thanks. And then over the weekend, it's like, oh, Friday I was in conversation with Eric, and then Monday I was hired. I was said yes to an email, and I was like, what am I doing? And because like I had to buy a plane ticket. It's like Doug, you don't do stuff like this. Like, you don't just buy plane tickets. Like, you're afraid of heights. What are you doing? It's like, you're going to Orlando, Florida. You're going to leave your job and you're going to start something you have no idea what's going to go on. It's like, you know that kids are involved and that you're going to be traveling to places, but everything else you have no idea. And I was like, sweet. Cool, Doug. Great adventure. And I went to Florida, and we traveled with a group of other individuals. I think it was 9 of us. Really great people. Actually, one of my teammates I went to Marion with, and so that was cool. And yeah, it was super fantastic. The only sad part, I guess, is what I didn't expect was so at Gatsby River, everything is very direct, one-on-one. Like, you're very personal with the campers, but with Catholic Heart, it's kind of indirect. So much so that we had to schedule time to like be with the campers. It's called Camper Mingle, it's fantastic. It's great. It's just our jobs, like as summer staffers, are to serve them so much that we don't get to see them all too often, because we like run program. We're doing skits, talks, we're preparing meals. And with the Catholic Heart, if you're not familiar, which some of you might not be, is the kids go out during the day into a city and they do service projects for different people. So like might help a hoarder, like get rid of things. They might be building a ramp for people that need it for like to get in their house, or just cleaning, regular maintenance, just like nice things. Sometimes they work in schools and churches, all different things. It's a really great program. The kids love it. So, it is an odd duck of ministry though. Definitely. And so by the end of the summer, I knew that I was going to go to WKU, and I want to touch back a little bit. So the reason I left to go to Catholic Heart is I hated Cracker Barrel, but also there's a certain amount of like loneliness that occurred to me. That spring semester is like, I lived with my grandparents during that year or that time, which is great. But I mean, I was working late into the night, and so they were already in bed. And then I'd be leaving in the morning because I was working more than 40 hours a week. And so there's like this a bit of loneliness that occurred because there really wasn't a community of people that I could like lean on into. There's like no young adults around. There was no really young adult ministries occurring right at that moment. It was like starting. Some of the things were starting, but I had no time to go to do that. I was able to make it to Mass because Mass is a priority to me. And so I was always going to Mass either in the morning or like mid-afternoon, like at noon at St. Stephen's. And so during Catholic Heart, I was just like, why did you call me here? Like, why am I doing this? Like, I love camp and I love campers and I love kids and I like ministry, but like, I don't get to talk to these kids at all. I mean, I'm doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff and there's stuff that's happening. Like kids are being changed, but why'd you call me here? And it didn't occur to me till the end of the year or the summer. And it was like, Doug, he just wanted you to be with people. Like God was just calling you to community. It's like, that's the reason you went to seminary. God called me to seminary to experience community, like a community of men. Like I said, I didn't yearn for priesthood. I yearned for seminary. I was longing for community. And that was why I went to WKU. I knew the community there. It's like, I don't care what degree I'm seeking. I'm going to WKU because I know this community is going to love me and I can do stuff with it. And luckily they had a major that was great for ministry, which I've found out in the past semester being an intern. And yeah, so in the 2019, I started my rec degree. And I loved it. Being outdoors was a concentration in outdoor recreation because it's just been great. And so this last semester, I'm actually done. This is great. I stopped like Tuesday, but I was able to intern with Matt Knight he's a youth minister at St. Pius X for my internship. And it was something we worked on when I was working at Cracker Barrel, but we just couldn't get it going. And then we were planning for last summer, but that didn't happen. I think everyone knows why. And, and so I was like, hey, I got to finish my degree with an internship. And we'd already talked about being an internship. He actually told me the day before I flew out to Orlando, he's like, hey, your internship's approved. Back in 2019, I was like, sick. Didn't happen in 2020, 2021. Here we are. I just finished. It was a great experience. I love Matt. Yeah, I just really opened my eyes to ministry and the parish. And I don't think I would give up this internship for anything. It was one of the best experiences I've had with ministry. And yeah, I guess that's where it puts me on a story. It's like I'm about to graduate after a long haul of a lot of stuff the Lord's been doing to me. It's so funny. It's like ever since I left seminary, that's when like it all started. Like we're told like the Lord chases us, you know, that one song is like chases me down, fights not found. It's like, that's true. Like the Lord pursues us and I'm pursuing the Lord. And sometimes I get really close. Like I'm about to touch him, but then he runs away or like, and then it's like, oh, he's behind me now. He's chasing me. It's like, no, I'm running away from him. Kind of like elbow tag. If anyone knows what elbow tag is, you get tagged and you have to tag the other person and you have to find elbows. Anyways, it doesn't matter. So I'm like chasing the Lord and it's just been a complete pursuit and it's been tiresome at times and I've had to persevere through a lot of things. But the one thing I think that has stayed true throughout this time is that like the Lord continues to show that he loves me. And I just have to be willing to say, like, I love him for what he does. Yeah, so, like, the Lord just continues to present opportunities to, like, minister and disciple. And you just got to go through the moments and just say like, all right, yeah, this was a really crappy day. Like, this is a really crappy thing that happens. Like, but what does the Lord show me today? Like, what does the Lord want me to do? And it all kind of falls down into trust. And that's like the one thing I like to tell people in my story is that, you know, we say like, we know that the Lord is faithful. And whenever I try to make a bigger decision now, the thing I pray about is like, okay, Lord, in what decision are you going to be asking me to trust you more? And that's usually the decision you should go with. It's got me here, and now I'm going to be doing focus. That's crazy because I don't know anything. Don't know where we're going to be in the fall. Some university, Bible studies and discipleship, but you know, it's just life. It's trust in the Lord and continue to trust him. He's great. I love Jesus. I think that's a story. We'll just wrap it there.
Thank you so much, Doug, for sharing your story with us. If it's okay, I've just got a couple of questions for you.
Of course.
The first thing I guess I really want to talk about, I don't know that you use this terminology, but in the very beginning of your story, you talked about a conversion of your intellect, or maybe an involvement of your intellect versus an involvement of your heart. I guess I'm looking back to where you said you were very interested in service. You were involved in like U2000s and ODYC, NCYC, Tech, etc., that you loved serving, but that you didn't really have a personal relationship with Jesus. So basically what I'm looking for is maybe an explanation of how you move from this conversion of intellect to a conversion of your heart.
So what I meant within that, like serving, but with like no heart, so to say, with Christ is an idea that, you know, some people serve because it's morally good, not really because they want to like love Jesus. Like they're not doing it from the love of their hearts. Like Mother Teresa loved from her heart. She had a heart for the people. Some people don't do that, and it's not wrong to like do that. Some people do it for philanthropy. Some people do it because they want some ounce of pride or accomplishment with it. But you're still serving the Lord, and you're still doing the Lord's work, and he can affect you, and he affected me. And so it wasn't like I didn't think that the Lord loved me. I just didn't know in my heart that the Lord loved me. I could hear, you can tell someone every single day of their lives, like the love, like God loves you, like God loves you, God loves you, God loves you. But until you open your heart door, you won't know. And it takes that time when the Lord says something, like when the Lord speaks to you, like directly to your heart, that's when you know. And that was those two times, like the Lord spoke to my heart. You know, it wasn't that thundering noise and like, God, like, Doug, you are my son and I love you. It's like, he just flips the switch and it's like, this is that love. It's this silent flame that's just roaring for us. And then when we open our heart to it, we just feel that warmth, kind of like when you're really cold outside and then the sun breaks through the clouds and it just hits you. And so you feel this warmth like on your back and on your skin, and it's overwhelms your whole body. And so that's like the Lord spoke to my heart. And so during that time, I guess that process is that when I was serving at campus, like I loved to serve. Like I knew this is what the Lord wanted for me. And it's like, okay, so if I want to be saved, like I gotta do the Lord's service. And I wasn't like half-hearted in anything I was doing. It's like I was doing it because I loved camp. It's like people do things for the things they love. It's like I'll do the dishes for my mom because I love my mom. So for me, serving like at camp and other things, I didn't do it because like I had no love for God. Like I had to love God to some regard to do some of those things, because that's hard work. It was pretty exhausting. But there was no like wholeheartedness in what I was doing. There was no like, it's not what it is now, like where I become aware and I know that I need to serve. Maybe it was like serving without conviction would be how I'd probably put that, because I wasn't super convicted. Like if I went out, I could serve a week at camp and then see a homeless person on the street and then say not a word to them, you know, but the Lord tells us like, we have to do that. Like, I will not always be with you, but the poor will always be with you. And so if you're serving with, I don't think it's wrong to serve without conviction, but it definitely makes a difference in what you're doing. And if that answer your question more.
Yeah. And I think, it sounds like, and I think this is a phenomenon for a lot of people in, maybe Christians and people in ministry. And I've found myself in those places over different points in my life where I know these things in my head. I know, what I'm supposed to do. There's a moral obligation. And it's not that I'm not doing it because I don't care about the people in front of me, but sometimes it's because it's an obligation or because I know I'm supposed to. And, there's this knowledge of how I'm supposed to be and a desire on my part to be like Jesus, but I haven't quite allowed that to make its way to my heart to where I really feel things as Jesus feels them. It's always been my prayer to, break my heart for what breaks yours, Lord. Allow me to feel the way about my neighbor as you feel about them. And that's a really big request and a really difficult one. And then one that's led to a lot of heartbreaking over the years because everything breaks his heart. But, I see that movement that has to happen where we recognize that not just I'm doing this because I need to, but out of a genuine desire for love of another and the love that God has for us and this intense and deep desire within us to serve because of love, regardless of the person in front of us. Like you said, not because I love camp, but because this person on the side of the road is hungry and Jesus loves them and he sees that and he wants to reach out to them. So the next thing I want to move on to your experience of the seminary, and something that you said maybe in the middle of this really caught my attention as you were talking about dealing with this attraction that you felt, or infatuation, I think is what you called it, to one of the people you served with on summer staff. And you said, you don't want to leave the seminary for a girl. And you told any girl out there listening, if a guy's willing to leave the seminary for you, run. And I wholeheartedly agree with that statement because this is a discernment process. You discerned in, you discern out, not for a person, but for a vocation or for whatever reason the Lord's calling you out. So first, I'd like to define that term discernment. Would you feel comfortable talking about kind of what discernment is and what that process looks like?
Yeah. Hold some value, but don't hold everything. So I think, if I remember correctly, discernment, like within the roots, maybe Latin roots, is like to sift. So like think about these gold miners out in the Old West, they had these like screens that they would sift through the sand. So the sand would pass through and it would reveal the treasure, this gold. And that's essentially what discernment is. You just have this massive like clop of dirt and sand, but there might be some gold in it. And so you just take it all and you just slowly go through it all and move it around. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things for people is because when you make a decision, especially a large decision like seminary, there's this, I think it's Ignatius, he says like there's consolation periods, there's desolation periods. And so you're going to be in the valley. Like it's just going to happen. And so when you experience this dryness in prayer, that you got to persevere through that. I think you shouldn't make a decision against what you think. It's like, so even though I was in seminary and there was this like uneasiness about why. It's like, should I be here? Should I not be here? It's like, well, I'm going to continue to go because, well, the Lord really never said anything about me going. It was just kind of like, well, Lord, should I be here? And the Lord didn't say anything. You know, you're just going to have those periods where you're just persevering. And that's discernment, I think, in a kind of like a nutshell, maybe. You're trying to find the treasure. You're trying to find what the Lord wants for you. And it's a process. Like, not every time you pick up the sand to go look for gold, are you going to find gold? Like, sometimes it's just going to be sand. And it might take months. It could take years. Or it could take like a day. You never know. Sometimes you get lucky. I think that's quite a bit of discernment. And discernment, it's not discernment until you say yes. Like, you have to be willing to say, Lord, let thy will be done.
I really like that definition of it, and the visual of like sifting through, trying to figure out what it is, because that's often what it feels like in the discernment process, is really of like weeding out, trying to figure out, pull away what is him, what isn't him. So I love this idea of sifting. And a couple of other things that you said was that, you know, you talked about somebody said to take it semester by semester. Was it your spiritual director?
It was Father Joe Moriarty. He was a rector at the seminary.
Okay. The rector at the seminary. So taking it semester by semester. And I think a lot of times there's this perception that if a man enters the seminary, out comes the product of a priest.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that any?
Yeah. So that's, so men are in seminary for like 8 to 9 years, depending on the diocese. And it's crock pot cooking. That's what you are. Men that go to seminary are crockpot cookers. And yeah, it's not, if you've never been to seminary or even know what seminary is, like, it's not a bunch of guys walking around. Like, I don't know if you've seen Monty Python and Holy Grail. Like, we're not walking around like praying and then whacking pieces of wood on our head, although it feels like it sometimes. And it's just a group of guys hanging out, chilling, loving the Lord. So I think to maybe define things a little more is helpful. So college seminarian, which is what I was, a lot of that is about human formation. That's the molding and crafting the man who will be the priest. And that's a lot what seminary is. It's this formation of the man to priest. And a lot of guys that go into seminary, in college seminary, they're like probably right out of high school or a little bit into college. And so they're still kind of boys. They're not like men. They might have beards, but they still play Dungeons and Dragons and play video games. Normal guys. And so that's what one of the pillars of formation is: human, and spiritual, pastoral, and academic. And so the two of those pillars that are focused on the most are academic and human. And there are spiritual and pastoral like work into that too. So that you do service and things. It's not until major seminary that men are starting to say like, oh, this is serious. This is probably, so you're like dating the church. When you're in seminary, you're dating the church. And so if I was dating a woman, our first 4 years are kind of like maybe like the first year of the relationship. It's like, all right, you're kind of getting to know each other more. Like, you're investing, like you're taking time away, but like you're still like individuals. Like, you still do things by yourself. Like, you still have your own friends and hang out. And then that second to third year is like major seminary. It's like, okay, like at this point you should probably be thinking like, all right, this is going to be about all or nothing. Because when you get to major seminary, it's a lot more serious. Like, you have to be thinking, it's like, do I really want to marry the church? Like, do I really want to marry this woman? It's like, is this a woman that if I die, I could see my kids take care of or being taken care of. And like, she's going to be great. You know, she's not just a good looker, you know, and by the point of deacon. So when men get to the diaconate phase, so that's after a couple of years of theology, that is the engagement. So when a guy is preparing for diaconate, that's going to be the thing in his mind. It's like, if I say yes to this now, it's not like he can turn back, because once you're ordained a deacon, you're a deacon. You know, not to like scare anyone, but like, you know, it's like if you.
But it's a serious process.
Yeah, it's a serious process. Like, it's really hard to pull
lightly.
up. It's hard to pull out of an engagement. So like when you finally say yes to like ask the church, because I mean, it's always an ask. Like if you ever been to an ordination, it's like the church. It's like, do you find this man worthy to be a priest or a deacon? And the church says yes. And so, much like a relationship, that's when the engagement starts. And then when the men, they're past the diaconate phase, they've spent a year, and that engagement period, that's that last preparatory period. So they're starting, like deacons do like homiletics, they're doing some baptisms, they might help in the celebration of the weddings, and they're serving more in like the church and the parish maybe, and they're finalizing some of the things they need to know. It's like they're probably reading through the Book of Blessings, they're reading through the Roman Missals. Like, all right, so I'm gonna have to know how to pray the Mass, and that's probably the period of like the man and woman that are going to get married. They're like, all right, so how's this wedding going to happen? Where are we going to live? How are the finances going to be taken care of? It's like, how many kids did you say you wanted? It's like, are we going to be able to provide for them? It's like, that's the stuff that's going on. That diaconate to ordination to priesthood. And when the men are ordained priests, that is the wedding night. The whole community is involved. And one of the beautiful things about when you're ordained, the first like stole or candle like given to your like father and mother, like just certain items. So there's no like walking down the aisle. The son doesn't walk down the aisle, but with his daughter. Wait, that's not how you say that. The father doesn't walk down the aisle with his daughter, like presenting him. The men like present themselves in front, but the family is there and the church community is there. And I said, yes, like he is worthy. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic explanation.
But you can leave at any time. That's the thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's it. I think what you were getting to or alluding to is that it's a process. And just like any dating relationship, you may start the relationship, get to know the person, think that they're wonderful and fantastic, but also realize that they're not the one for you.
Yeah.
And therefore the relationship ends. And so just the decision to enter the seminary, I assume, would be similar, that you date the church for a while. She might be great and she's a wonderful gal, but not the girl for you. Mm-hmm. And therefore discerning out is an important part of that process as well. Very good.
And it could be she's not the girl for you right now.
Very true. So community seems to be, it was an important theme for you. You mentioned towards the end of the podcast that was the reason the Lord called you into seminary, was to experience and be around this community. And that was something that you experienced with Gasper and with Catholic Heartwork Camp, and the reason that you chose to go to college at WKU. So I guess if you could just talk about the importance of community in your life, and I guess how that benefits you. Like,
I think the Lord called me to community and has continued to call me community because I think for a bit of time when I was growing up, I was probably a bit of a loner. I mean, I had friends, but it's hard to say like I had a best friend or I had like this friend group. And I've definitely had friend groups in my life. But growing up in Beaver Dam, there's not really a lot of Catholic people. There aren't a lot of Catholic young people, especially. And I think the Lord just wanted to put me into community, people that like gets it, you know? it's fun to have friends that are not Catholic, but it's really great to be able to say like, oh yeah, and like at adoration, which like, oh, how is adoration? Like, I just love Jesus, and like, yeah, and you can talk, like you can talk church a bit, it's kind of nice. And so I think the Lord calling me to community was giving me some sense of fraternity, especially at seminary, because I knew at any point if I was not feeling great or like I want to talk to someone, all I had to do was walk down to the kitchen. There's always someone in the kitchen. And if there wasn't someone in the kitchen, you just had to wait 5 minutes and someone would walk in. Like the kitchen was used more than any room ever because, you want
Most kitchens are.
You want to get a man, you just through his stomach. It's true. It's so true. Like you just go through his stomach, like put some Oreos and milk on the table and you're good, unless he's lactose intolerant. Yeah, I think the Lord calling me to community was to help me to know and realize that, you have brothers, like there are other men that are like striving to grow and be men for the Lord. But also with that came fraternal correction. So that's kind of a fancy word for just being able to tell someone that, like, hey, you need to watch yourself. Like, it's not like watch yourself, like blah. It's more like maybe you're in a group of people and they're not using language that is really permissible around a certain crowd they're at. It's like it's kind of taboo for an adult to walk into a daycare and start cursing. That's not what you just shouldn't do that. It's taboo to curse. And so that's type of fraternal correction. It gets deeper, and that also comes with relationships. That comes with relationships in the seminary. So, it's the disciples of Jesus. Like it was just like that. It's like every guy had their beloved John, but they also had their in group. They had their Peter, James, and John, and then they had the 12, and then there was the community as whole. And it was different too. Like there's all about invitation. So if we're like going out to see a movie, it's a group of guys, like maybe 4 or 5. As we're like going out the door, if we see any of the guys like, hey, we're going to go watch a movie. Would you like to come? This guy's driving. We have more seats. And they're like, yeah. And they have the chance to say no. And so community was this area of invitation. This, like inviting people into your life, inviting people to do things with you. Especially, I remember you do things with people you don't like. And that is really great because when you do things with people you don't like, you know what they're saying about you. And so if they don't like you, it's like, oh, you get to keep your enemies close, they won't hurt you because they're beside you, but they might not. I don't know. Yeah, but community is really important for me because it helps me know that like I'm known. I think it's the hierarchy of needs. Like as one of the basic needs for individuals is that they have to be in community, and the Lord asks us to be in community. Like in Acts, like you have to do these things as a group. Like they never went out in ones; they went out in pairs to towns. And the apostle. And Christ called the apostles that. And like Christ needed community. I mean, he had his Peter, James, and John. He had the 12 disciples. And so community aspects are super important.
Well, and the Trinity itself is community. It's a community of love. You never have the Father without the Son, without the Spirit, without the Father.
Yeah.
It's a community. Yeah. 3 persons in one. So this idea of community, like it's not just what we're called to, it's what we're built for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely. It's our purpose to love and to be loved.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. It's like you think of maybe Old Testament communities, the covenants. I feel like that's kind of a roundabout where the Lord is putting me at is I had a covenant with like the whole world. It's like the seminary is that covenant. And then it moves on to like a smaller one. So like I was around 9 people, like 8 other people. And then like the Newman Center at WKU is like, yeah, it's a really large community, but you still had like your own friend group. So it's kind of like seminary, but I still have like the 1 or 2, or the 5. And so going into focus now, it's like, oh, I'm going to be like in 3. So this is like my Peter, James, and John time. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know. I could be wrong.
We'll come back to this in a couple of months.
Yeah, in a couple of months I'll come back and they'll say something about it. But it's like, this is like Peter, James, and John moment. Maybe if the Lord keeps calling me community, and then maybe it's like, maybe I'll have my beloved, my John the beloved at some point, and then I'll be a community. But community is super important.
Since you mentioned focus a couple of times, just in case somebody doesn't know what focus is, you want to explain what that is real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Because that's the next step on your journey.
It is the next step on my journey. So focus stands for Fellowship of Catholic University Students, and I'm a missionary. My name's Doug Payne. And what happens with focus is I said yes to start, and I will go to a staff training. I'll support race so I can live well. But the most important part is I will be put at a university, maybe a Newman Center, with a group of 200 or 300 individuals, maybe 5. Sometimes there's 5 people. And I will be just on mission, like doing what the church longs and asks for us to do. It's like, go out and make disciples of all nations. And so that'll be the mission for the fall semester. Not that like that's not really the mission now, but I'm still in like a prep period before that. And, the disciples were in a prep period too. And Focus does this well by discipleship. So there's this, it used to be like one-on-ones, but it's changed to like group, which I feel like is really great. And that means, the group means that you have like 1 or 2 people, like a missionary who's like gets close to this one guy or this one woman. And they're like, all right, let's like like a missionary, I would ask Jesse, like, hey, Jesse, why don't you go out and find a couple of your friends? And then we're going to meet and like have coffee together, and then we'll meet again. And eventually that might grow, and it could have more people, it could have less, probably no more than like 5 to 7. You don't want that too big of a group. And that's your like discipleship like group, Peter, James, and John, the apostles. And the missionary is just there to help disciple that. So you're like being Jesus, and you're like coordinating each of those individuals. And I mean, obviously you don't just like throw them into a room and say, all right, good luck, like fight over this one donut. So that's kind of discipleship, because the approach is going to be like, you're going to be hands-on, but eventually that person you're discipling, or you're helping to lead to disciple others to grow in relationship with them, you're going to say like, hey, do you think you could do this again? Like, think you could just go ahead and continue this? Like, there's other people to learn and love and glory. It's like, all right, so yeah. So it's supposed to be like this, like growing effect,
Yeah.
Spreading out,
The 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like a tree,
Mm-hmm.
It's like if we're as a tree, you're like rooted in the faith, and then you just kind of blossom in spring, and maybe sometimes like a branch might die. So you just have to prune it. It's just how it goes. And I don't expect as a missionary in the fall that every relationship I develop is going to bear fruit at that time when I'm there. I could be there for 2 years. I can work with the same individual for 2 years, and they take no step towards the Lord. But if I'm there and I at least say like, the Lord loves you, like maybe it'll come back in 10 years if they're so blessed to live continue life, then they might have that moment and be like, yeah, I remember when this guy said something about Jesus, and I didn't think about it at this point, but now I'm here. And because we don't convert people.
Oh yeah,
the Lord
Jesus
converts
does
us. Like,
we just plant seeds.
Yeah, we
water
seeds.
them.
We're the sower.
He brings forth the fruit.
Yeah. We just plant seeds, and if they get a rain, they get a rain. If they get a drought, they get a drought. It's like, I'd have no control, but I can try my best.
We're just called to love and to serve. And
it's just called to love and serve. Like, I could go into focus and I have I see no fruit at all. It looks like nothing happened. Like, no one had anything. It's the worst thing ever. But then I could leave, and then years later something happens. Or I might get one or two individuals. And so that's discipleship. And you have Bible studies, which I love Bible study. It's great. Like, knowing the typologies and how Old Testament and New Testament really are cohesive, and ultimately is fulfilled in the new. It's super great. And they do a bunch of other things, but haven't been
you haven't properly trained yet.
Well, I have not as much, I guess, participation in it, because I've only been at WKU for like a year and a half, and this last semester I wasn't there. But they do mission trips, and we have Seek conference, and then there's the SLS conference. And if you don't know, Seek is the next Seek. I think it's happening next year.
I believe it happens in January, February.
Yeah, January, February. It'll be in Salt Lake City, Utah. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So I just have one last question for you.
Sure.
It's pretty easy, I think. You talked about, so when you really had this encounter moment, and you said you realized that if you were going to, take this seriously, that you needed to do something, to have a prayer life, to develop a prayer life. And so you began to pray the rosary daily. I assume that your prayer life has evolved and changed and grown over the years.
Definitely.
So if you could talk a little bit about that evolution, and I guess kind of where you're at in your prayer life now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, prayer life definitely evolves. I mostly prayed the rosary until I went to seminary, and then that's when a lot of things became routines: daily mass, holy hours, Tuesday, Thursdays, and I was able to go to confession like as regularly as I wanted to. I could go every day if I wanted, really. And so that really set a priority in my life. It's like, like mass is super important, and I crave for adoration. Like, I want to sit with the Lord. And it was a lot different being in seminary, is actually encountering the Lord in the silence, because we do silent holy hours. There's not really like this praise and worship thing that happens in seminary, at least in the college level. But it was really great because I was able to sit in silence with the Lord. And also the liturgy, the hours. And before the end of my, when I left, I was doing almost all the hours. I was doing morning prayer, office of readings, the mid-morning, daytime, evening, and night prayer. The seminary required us to do all of these like every day, like morning prayer and evening prayer every day. But we didn't have to do office. We didn't have to do daytime. We didn't even have to do evening prayer on Saturdays. That was your own accord, because it was just, Saturdays and Sundays a little bit more open. But after I left, I didn't feel like it was fulfilling me. Like, this wasn't doing anything for me. I was like, okay, well, where does this put me? I was like, well, I have to go to mass. Like, I have to go to mass. So my prayer life it kind of suffered a bit, because I wasn't able to do holy hours as much as I would have liked. And when I did, it was really nice, but all I really had was mass, and I was praying the rosary every day. Still, I've kept that up ever since I started. And then even when I went to Catholic Heart, it was a little hard, because we were always doing something. It was super duper hard. I was able to go to mass every day, which was great. But getting a rosary in, sad to say, didn't always happen during the weeks. We prayed on the way, like when we were driving, and that was always great. So my prayer life kind of suffered a bit. In that period of 2019, when I got back in the fall to WKU, is when I was able to say, okay, I'm going to mass. Priority. Holy hours are happening. And during that time, I was starting to study the Bible more. Oh, well, that was also some habits. I started reading the Bible. I was actually reading the Bible. It was really odd. It was like Daniel. This is while I was still in seminary. I was super inspired by one of the stories in Daniel. I was like, wow, that was super great. I was I want to read Daniel. And then I read a bunch of the other prophetic books of the Old Testament. And then, but I've been like slowly going through each of the books. It's okay. You haven't read all the Bible yet. I was in seminary, and it's fine. Like, don't feel like if you didn't read the Bible all the way through, you're not a heathen. Like, it's completely fine. But you could always start.
And just start somewhere.
Yeah, and just start somewhere. Start somewhere you like,
I wouldn't suggest the beginning. The first 5 books are a little tough to get through.
Yeah, they're a little tough. But the epistles or the Gospels.
Yeah,
great
the Gospels or the prophets in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Those tend to have some good stuff. Psalms
are great.
Psalms are great.
Yes, but prayer life. I just did holy hours and all that. And all that. That's so vague. Yeah, so that was, and I was starting to try to do morning prayers. And so eventually after my fall and going to spring, I started trying to pray every day, like in the morning before I left the house. And so I was praying the Litany of Humility. And when COVID hit, which was kind of a big bummer, but also pretty great, I knew that because Mass wasn't occurring and I wasn't able to receive Jesus, like I had to spend more time with him because I wasn't going to be able to receive him. And so I picked up the Liturgy of the Hours again. Like that was, Liturgy of the Hours is one of the most powerful prayers that we have too in the church. And so I started praying the Liturgy of the Hours in the morning. And I was doing like 2 hours of adoration because I had all the time of the world in COVID world. I had nowhere to be. I had no obligations. I was a student. I didn't have a job either. Where could I work? Nothing was open. So it was a really great time to just sit with the Lord. And that's when I started making my holy hours a holy hour. And I was inviting silence into my hours. So it was like, all right, I'm going to start with like 5 minutes of silence, 10 minutes of silence. And about now, like at 15 minutes, I can sit with the Lord for about 15 minutes. I get distracted a lot, but like I still like try to sit and just be with the Lord and try not to fall asleep. That's like a big thing too. It's just fine to like take a nap with the Lord, but if you have the time to take a nap before you sit with the Lord, take a nap before you sit with the Lord. Yeah, but then Masses came back. 2 hours didn't really occur anymore, but that whole summer was all great, and I kind of continued all that. And then at some point, I don't remember when it started, but I started doing the 5-finger prayer for Mother Teresa. And if you're not familiar with that, it's really simple. So your thumb is the people closest to you because your thumb is the closest to your body. Their index finger is for people like teachers, instructors, those in authority. But that's also the middle finger. The middle finger is like your political leaders, governments, because it's the biggest finger, your hierarchy. And the third is actually the weakest. So you pray for the weak. And yeah, that's just about it. It's like you pray for those who are weak. And that it could be anything. And that changes all the time. And then the pinky is yourself, like praying for yourself. And it's good to pray for yourself. It's good because that's when you're asking the Lord for things. Like how can you do things for the Lord if you're not asking the Lord to give you things, like give you the strength to persevere through trial? Or like God, I just need to be loved today. Like, will you love me? Like, show me yourself. And that prayer takes half an hour, just half an hour, 45 minutes almost every morning. And that's also, I pray like a litany of humility, and I do like 3 or 4, I do like 3 different St. Joseph prayers because St. Joseph is the bomb. And I just did a consecration of St. Joseph in the year like of St. Joseph when Pope Francis declared, I was like, sick. And I did it on the Holy Family, which was my birthday this past year. So that was super neat. And it was really great. So I do the St. Joseph prayer. And I always try to always do a rosary every day whenever I can try to. And that's like my morning prayer. And that's people that I know. And so anytime I hear things. And people don't have to ask for prayers. Like, I'll just think of them, like I pray for them. I think one of the biggest prayers I do in the morning, which is something I read in the Imitation of Christ, which used to be part of like my morning prayer. I would read like a chapter, Imitation of Christ, because they're pretty short, each of the chapters. Imitation of Christ. He says, the prayer is that the Lord's will may be fulfilled in my life. And that's like a sentence of the Imitation of Christ. But I add on that the Lord's will may be fulfilled in my life, and I may be fully prepared to accept it.
That's the key, that I may be prepared to accept it.
Yeah. And I was like, I feel like that's why I add it. Yeah. And then, so now, I guess now with my internship, with my prayer life, I have the ability to go to mass every day. And it's like kind of part of my job, like to pray, because ministry is, you got to pray. You got to ask the Lord to do things in your life. And I usually have time to do a holy hour, and that's super great. And this is something new that's kind of happening is in my prayer life is if I do like a reading of the Bible or I read some type of spiritual reading, I always do short parts of it. And it's usually different. A lot of it's kind of based on feelings. So sometimes I'm journaling and that's all I do. Sometimes I read the Bible. I might read a lot of the chapters because I was like, wow, this is super great. Or I read more chapters of a spiritual reading. But sometimes you just need healing, and you just need to be with the Lord. Something I experienced, it happened even yesterday, is I just sat with the Lord and I had my hands open. I'm just like asking the Holy Spirit to come down. I was like, Lord, just fulfill me. Like, I just had a really bad day, and I just need you to like fill my heart with your love. I just need to know that whatever is going on, like, it's fine. And it's like, I know you love me. And there was great things that happened today, you know. It's really a conversation with the Lord. And I try to ask for particular people in my life that I'll like sit and like, come Holy Spirit, like pray for them individually. That's something I read is it's more, the prayer is more meaningful to say, Lord, I just ask that you be with this person and with their family and getting through this, like, their like loneliness, this, that, yada, yada. Instead of saying like, Christ be with all wives today. It's like, okay, you know some wives. You might know some wives that need a lot of prayer, or moms or dads, and like just being open to like pray for them individually and ask in their name that they hear your voice. And I usually am with myself. And that also is involved with, it's not just a petition prayer. It's like, God, thank you for today. Just thank you for the beauty of the day. Thank you for the rain. Thank you for it being nasty. It's kept me inside and I got work done. Just thank him for everything, because gratitude's important. You got to say thank you, because you have nothing. You are nothing without the Lord. And so it's really important to thank him. And then he might petition, and then there's say like, sorry, Lord, like I suck. I know I didn't do what you want today. I was like, I really want to do what you want, but it's really hard to say no to ice cream or that last scoop, or that person really was annoying today. So thank you.
That driver cut me off in traffic. That's where it gets me.
Yeah. Or maybe we're impatient with someone, or you weren't open to someone completely. It's like you just turn your eye away from them and like weren't having conversation with them. Didn't make them feel loved. And just ask that. It's the petition. That's usually my last few minutes. And then I end all my holy hours with the Litany of Trust. That's a prayer given by the Sisters of Life in New York that I was given years ago when I was in seminary. And it's super great because it's real. It's a real prayer. The litany of trust is not just, I guess, like nominational prayers. So what I mean by nominations, like naming. So if you're praying like litany of St. Joseph, like protector of Holy Church, pray for us. Protector, blah, blah, blah. Like charity is like, that's a great prayer. Don't get me wrong. I love St. Joseph. But it's like that my sufferings may be united with yours. Jesus, I trust in you. Or like, deliver me, Jesus. And one of the last prayers is like, that I am your beloved one. Jesus, I trust in you. Just asking, it's like, deliver me, Jesus, from these things. And then, Jesus, I trust in you. There's also another great prayer. That's a surrender prayer. I also recommend Novena Surrender. And you don't even have to do the novena, but the one prayer is, Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything. And that's just to enumerate that to yourself over and over again is fantastic. And just because you don't own anything you have. Like it's just true. Like you are, like I said, you're nothing without the Lord. And so the Lord wants you to surrender yourself to him. It's just say like, Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Like I surrender my body, my worries, my fears. Like it's all yours. You are my greatest fulfillment. Jesus, I trust. Jesus, I surrender myself to you. It's like, take care of everything. And he will. He does take care of us because he's great. He loves us. Just got to trust him. Yeah, that's kind of my prayer life.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of, it's very much evolved and what the difference is that it's personal. You know, it's my relationship with Jesus is no longer, or God, the Spirit. It's no longer just one person. Like it wasn't just Jesus or it wasn't just Father. Like I'm asking every person of the Trinity, trying to every day to like be with me. And then also that personal relationship, like he's your friend. Like Jesus is my brother and like God is my Father and like the Spirit is my friend. And
I'd say that for anyone who's listening, I think the key thing I heard you say was that it has evolved over time. Mm. And so if you're looking at starting a prayer life or don't have one currently, it's important to remember that you got to start small and you got to start somewhere and work your way up because it's going to evolve over time and it's going to change over time. And so in the beginning, it might just be 5 minutes, or that 5-finger prayer might take 5 minutes. And then eventually you can work your way into a holy hour. You even talked about this with your holy hour that started out with just a few minutes of silence and have worked your way up to 15 minutes because that's hard to sit for 15 minutes in silence. So if you are listening or feeling overwhelmed by the various things that Doug has said, know that if that's not what a prayer life has to look like, especially right away, it takes time to develop and grow that relationship. And it's something you work on over time. And so always start small and work your way up and build on those things. Just a little caveat. Well, thank you so much, Doug, for sharing your story with us.
Wow. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And thank you all for listening here today. If you are interested in hearing more stories of finding faith and encountering, tune in next week for our next guest. If you have questions, need someone to journey with, or would be interested in sharing your story, please contact me at findingfaith123@gmail.com.